So in this video, I want to talk to you about the astrology houses. So the astrology houses in astrology are going to be a totally new world if you are somewhat used to astrology, if you do know about the sun sign or your star sign, or most people just refer to it as their zodiac sign. And what they're talking about is their sun sign. And then in the last video, I explained to you guys about the moon sign. And the moon sign is the emotional self, or the intuitive self, or the internal self. And then the rising sign is the part of your chart that tells you what the rest of the world notices or sees about you, or what you initially show to the world. How you carry yourself can sometimes be the mask that you wear, or the facade that you put off, or whatever you're projecting. It can be conscious or unconscious. Usually it's unconscious, but sometimes it's not. And then that is going to be the tipping point, or not the tipping point, but the very beginning kind of the housing system. So the rising sign is also sometimes called the ascendant. So if you look at a horoscope, which a horoscope is the wheel that you'll see when you see your chart. Your chart is not just a bunch of names of the zodiac. It's not just a bunch of names of planets. It should be a circle, and it's going to have the numbers 1 through 12, just like a clock. And you have to look closely, otherwise you may not notice. But there's separate parts to the horoscope. So there's all 12 of the signs, and they're fixed. They're at a fixed location. So what that means is that as the Earth and all the other planets are moving, the zodiac signs, or the constellations rather, they do not move. So they are always, no matter where the Earth is as it rotates and moves, the constellations never move. They are always in the same place. So just because you see Big Dipper and Little Dipper over here one day and you see them over here another day, doesn't mean that they're moving. It means that we are moving. So the constellations, they do not move. The planets, obviously, they move clockwise. So everything is going, well, I guess it's opposite for you in the video, but everything is going, toward the right. Now, the houses are going to move, metaphorically speaking, because they're actually not physically there. But on a horoscope, we see them as moving counterclockwise. So let's put together the whole picture. We have the constellations, which are not moving. We have the planets that are moving clockwise. And then we have the houses that are moving counterclockwise. Now, if you think about this, we've got 3 different things. So we've got 10 planets, 12 signs, and 12 houses, and they are all moving or not moving in different directions. So that means you've got endless combinations of things. So you could be Gemini in the 3rd house with Mars and Pluto also falling in your 3rd house, but Mars and Pluto are actually in the sign of Libra, and they are aspecting 6th house Sagittarius with Saturn. So I'm just making stuff up right now, but that's how complex astrology can actually become. It's so very intricate. So a lot of people notice that it contradicts itself many times. So someone could have something like, Jupiter in Virgo, and it be very nitpicky, or always in the need for information, and not taking anything philosophical as factual or scientific, always needing evidence, stuff like that. But then we could have Sagittarius, ruling the 9th house, which is highly philosophical, and the moon being in that house, making our emotions, very wise and philosophical. But then we've got this Virgo and Jupiter, and, let's say it's in the 2nd house. So when it comes to numbers, it is going to be very, very, very nitpicky. It can be nitpicky and actually my Jupiter is in Virgo, it's going to be very specific with numbers. It's going to be very mathematical and practical, and it's going to argue the philosophical side of things. So those two things completely contradict each other, and it can be two separate sides of one's personality. One day you may get this, one day you may get that, depending on what provokes that side. And this is human nature. So whether or not it contradicts each other doesn't make it untrue, because this is human nature. This is how humans are. They contradict themselves all the time. They believe, they disbelieve, you know what I mean? And so this is why astrology can be so complex and intricate, because there is so much to it. There's endless combinations. And the housing system, the way that it works is your rising sign is based on the minute and second you were born. So it's not, you can look at it by the second. But if I was born, so my rising sign is Cancer, and I was born at 6:19 p.m. If I had been born later in that day, or in that hour, I would have been a Leo rising. So it's literally, I'm not sure what the exact increment is for the moment, but it could even be a few minutes later, or even a minute later, that could have made me a Leo. How you know your rising sign and everything following it, because that's how it works. So your rising sign / ascendant is usually going to rule your first house. And so my first house is ruled by Cancer. In my first house, you will find Chiron, which is an asteroid, a very big asteroid. Depending on the type of astrology that you use, so there's Vedic, you can use the whole signs, you can use equal houses, it just depends on what you want to use. But usually it's going to be the sign that follows. So mine is first house Cancer, second house Leo, third house Virgo, fourth house Libra, fifth house Scorpio, sixth house Sagittarius, seventh house Capricorn, eighth house Aquarius, ninth house Pisces, 10th house Aries, 11th house Taurus, 12th house Gemini. But if let's say that your rising sign in your first house won't always be the same. But as a general rule of thumb, if your rising sign is Taurus, then your first house is going to be Taurus, and then your second house would be Gemini, and your third house would be Cancer. If your ascendant / rising sign was Libra, then most likely, not always, but most likely, your first house will be ruled by Libra. Now, sometimes you'll have, where your ascendant is Libra, but your first house is Scorpio. And it's like a very, very, very fine line. It just depends on the measurements. It's all about the numbers and the time and, where you were born, the location. So the geographical measurements and the time increments. It just depends on the day, the minute, the place. It's all part of the measurement. So if your rising sign is Libra, then you're most likely either going to be first house Libra or first house Scorpio. And then if your first house is in Scorpio, then your second house is most likely going to be Sagittarius. And your third house is most likely going to be Capricorn. So in astrology, Aries is going to begin the signs. So when you look at the constellations, you're going to look at Aries first, and then next to Aries is always going to be Taurus on one side, but then on the other side, on the left side, it's going to be Pisces, and Pisces is last. So Pisces is 12. So Pisces also rules the 12th house naturally. Maybe not your 12th house, not my 12th house, but naturally, without a person there, just looking at the constellations and where they're located, then Pisces rules the 12th house, Aries rules the first house, Taurus rules the second house. Now, what the 12 houses are, where your planet expresses itself. So for example, if you have something like Pluto in the second house, this could mean that because the second house is all about money and property and wealth and stuff like that, if you have Pluto there, that can mean that money, property, stuff like that will somehow bring transformation for you. It could somehow be, and that's because Pluto is all about transformation. Or it could be, because Pluto is also about death and sex and stuff like that too, it could mean that you're going to get an inheritance after a death. Or it could mean that you are in the sexual industry.